Uddhava Kunjabihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Shadi Jamunatira Shadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Nana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Nana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Shadi Jamuna Tiravana Shadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pariviragacharya Astutparasasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing back to Uddhava Gita. This is the second chapter, starts in chapter 7 and carries on for many chapters. Just to get a refresh on what this whole section is about, there's 3 chapters, 7, 8, and 9, that largely are Krishna speaking to Uddhava about a conversation between King Yadu, a predecessor king for both of them in their family line, and an Avaduta Brahmin on knowledge and detachment. Devotion enriched by knowledge and detachment. And going back to chapter 7, which is where it begins, I'm going to read a little passage from this. The backward glance. This is Purijan Prabhu, drawing from various sources, starting with Sridhar Swami and his Sridhar Swami's comment on what this section is about. The BBT purport to text 20, that's 720, provides a prelude to the instructions found in this 7th chapter. A sensitive, reasonable person, just have to be sensitive and reasonable, can acquire real knowledge and happiness simply by carefully observing the world around him. By observing the happiness and distress of other living entities, one can understand what is beneficial and what is destructive. The purport to text 19, that's chapter 7, Srila Sridhar Swami is quoted as saying, even if one has not received the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one can understand by direct and indirect analysis that the material world is not a place of enjoyment. Direct analysis means one's personal experience, and indirect analysis means hearing and reading of the experience of others. Unquote. Srila Jiva Goswami concurs, and his comments are quoted in the BBT purport to text 20. The knowledge acquired by one's own perception and intelligence leads one to appreciate the value of the representative of Lord Krishna. Unquote. Why will knowledge gained in this way lead one to understand that he needs a guru who represents Lord Krishna? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, found in the purport of text 23, makes it clear that although much that is helpful in spiritual life can be understood solely through one's intelligence, Krishna himself can only be understood through bhakti, which must be performed under the direction of a merciful spiritual master. I'm just going to, there's Burijan cuts and pastes from that purport of text 23. One in a human form of life who engages in bhakti yoga directly searches for me, Krishna, by such bhakti inspired activities as hearing and chanting. Bhaktyaham ekaya graya, I'm only attained by bhakti. 11, 14, 21, that's Uddhava to Krishna. I'm attained only by bhakti. Bhaktyaham ekaya graya. Doubt. But can't they also see you by searching for you through inference? Since it is you who stimulates their intelligence. Krishna, no. I cannot be attained by inference using the intelligence or various indicators. Paragraph. But one can infer the existence of the dependent jiva, since the jiva's senses and intelligence must have a cause. One can somewhat infer the presence of Antaryami, the supersoul, who instigates the jiva's senses and intelligence. However, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna cannot be inferred in the same way, since his form, qualities, pastimes, and powers are inconceivable and beyond the ability of the intelligence to conceive. Now that's taken from the BBT purport of text 23 of this chapter 7. I'm going back to get the context of what's going on. There's a verse, by taking help of the intelligence, one can understand, not see, but one can understand the presence of supersoul. It's a very long purport. It's referred to again and again by your acharyas. So that's what's going on here. This is Gyan Vairagya, knowledge detachment that assists in understanding, well, there must be a soul, there must be a super soul by inference. And therefore, I need someone who can connect me to super soul. That's where Gyan becomes fruitful. Like the Bhagavad Gita verse, Bahunam Jamanamante, Gyanavan. What do you do when you have knowledge? Gyanavan, Mam Prabhajate. You surrender to Krishna. But you need a spiritual master to do that surrendering unto Krishna, because that's just Krishna's arrangement. You don't jump over, you go through. Paragraph. This is now back to Burijan. The quality of one's mind dictates how and what we perceive. For example, Gyanis see the world as impersonal. Business-minded people see the world as filled with financial potential, and abstract artists see the world as filled with juxtaposed, mutable forms. Paragraph. Uddhava has already told Krishna that he won't be able to bear his separation. So Krishna will teach Uddhava how to see him and how to feel his presence, even after Krishna returns to the spiritual world. Quoting, now this is the conclusion, quoting from the purport of text 21. This is BBT. In this chapter, Lord Krishna is training Uddhava to see the Lord's personal form in the course of his daily experiences in the material world. The Lord has already indicated to Uddhava that Uddhava will travel throughout the world in samadhi or trance. And now Lord Krishna is preparing Uddhava to travel as a true sannyasi, seeing the personality of Godhead everywhere. Unquote. So that's the context. Seeing through knowledge leads to detachment, or without knowledge, you're not going to be detached, or without knowledge, you'll be attached. So to be detached, you need knowledge. That's what's going on here. This is the Avadhuta Brahmana giving knowledge to King Yadu, Krishna sharing the same knowledge with Uddhava, so he can see Krishna as he travels about in samadhi, seeing Krishna everywhere and delivering the knowledge that Krishna has given him. So we're on the screen, it shows 11, 8, 2 through 5. We didn't finish verse number 1. Verse number 1 was starting with another one of the gurus as a python. And we're going to hear about pythons. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary, in the 8th chapter, that's this one, 9 gurus, such as the Python, are described, as well as the story of Pingala, which produces distaste for material pleasure. One should not over-endeavor for maintaining the material body. This is taught through the example of the Python in 4 verses. We started with the first one, and we're going to cover the other ones. Look at this. Just as suffering comes without desiring it, happiness also comes. What is the use of such desires? Knowledge attachment. And if you're going to be detached from sense pleasures, you got to be attached to something else. Or you're not going to be detached from sense pleasures unless you become attached to something else. So become attached to Sat, for starters, and then build. That's a life of sannyas, attached to Sat, or that's a sadhu, a devotee attached to Sat. It's the mandate for us. It's not 1, 2, 3. No, now it's done. What's next? It's a cultivation. Bhakti is a cultivation of detachment from the temporary, attachment to the eternal. There's reference to this verse, this 11.8.1, given by Bhakti Siddhanta in Adikanda, what we've been reading in the evening, Adikanda chapter 1. That's the advent of Lord Krishna, advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So here's what he writes. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11.8.1, as well as 7 and 8, so we're going to come to 7 and 8, and then 13 and 14 and 17 and 18, we're going to touch on those. The mendicant Brahmana further instructs Maharaj Yadu as follows. O king, the embodied living entity automatically experiences unhappiness in heaven or hell. Similarly, happiness will also be experienced even without one seeking it. Therefore, a person of intelligent discrimination does not make any endeavor to obtain such material happiness. One who has failed to control his senses immediately feels attraction upon seeing a woman's form, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, when the woman speaks with enticing words, smiles coquettishly, and moves her body sensuously, his mind is immediately captured, and thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence, just as the moth, that's another one of the gurus, just as the moth, maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flames. A foolish person with no intelligent discrimination is immediately aroused at the sight of a lusty woman, beautifully decorated with golden ornaments, fine clothing, and other cosmetic features. Being eager for sense gratification, such a fool loses all intelligence and is destroyed, just like the moth who rushes into the blazing fire. A stately person should never touch a young girl. In fact, he should not even let his foot touch a wooden doll in the shape of a woman. By bodily contact with a woman, he will surely be captured by illusion, just as the elephant is captured by the she-elephant due to his desire to touch her body. That's another one of the gurus in this section. A man possessing intelligent discrimination should not under any circumstance try to exploit the beautiful form of a woman for his sense gratification, just as an elephant trying to enjoy a she-elephant is kicked by the other bull elephants also enjoying her company. One trying to enjoy a lady's company can at any moment be killed by her other lovers, who are stronger than he. A stately person dwelling in the forest in the renounced order of life should never listen to songs or music promoting material enjoyment. Rather, a saintly person should carefully study the example of the deer, another guru, who is bewildered by the sweet music of the hunter's horn and is thus captured and killed, becoming attracted to the worldly singing, dancing, and musical entertainment of beautiful women. Even the great sage Rishishringa, the son of Mrigi, fell totally under their control, just like a pet animal. Now there's more. I think I'm going to read it. This is still Bhaktisiddhanta writing in Chaitanya Bhagavat, chapter 1 of Adikanda. So he's just kind of summarizing the chapter, which is just fine. So this chapter 8 is entitled The Lessons from Pingala. So now this paragraph is going to describe that to a prostitute. Pingala's words of frustration. Pingala was waiting for her, customer, and he didn't come, and she got frustrated and gave up her profession. Pingala's words of frustration are narrated by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11.8.30 through 34 as follows. Quote, "Just see how greatly illusioned I am, because I cannot control my mind. Just like a fool, I desire lusty pleasure from an insignificant man. I am such a fool that I've given up the service of that person who, being eternally situated within my heart, is actually most dear to me. The most dear one is the Lord of the universe, who is the bestower of real love and happiness, and the source of all prosperity. Although he is in my own heart, I have completely neglected him. Instead, I have ignorantly served insignificant men who can never satisfy my real desires and who have simply brought me unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. Oh, how I have uselessly tortured my own soul. I have sold my body to lust, greedy men who are themselves objects of pity. Lusty, greedy men who are themselves objects of pity. Thus, practicing the most abominable profession of a prostitute, I hoped to get money and sex pleasure. This material body is like a house in which I, the soul, am living. The bones forming my spine, ribs, arms, and legs are like beams, cross beams, and pillars in the house. The whole structure, which is full of stool and urine, is covered by skin, hair, and nails. The 9 doors leading into this body are constantly excreting foul substances. Besides me, what woman would be so foolish to devote herself to this material body, thinking that she might find pleasure and love in this contraption? Certainly, in this city of Videha, I alone am completely foolish. I neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who awards us everything, even our original spiritual form, and instead I desire to enjoy sense gratification with many men." And then, unquote, then he says, please see verses 35, 39, and 42 in the same chapter. So here they are. 35. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolutely the most dear one for all living beings, because he is everyone's well-wisher and Lord. He is the Supreme Soul situated in everyone's heart. Therefore, I will now pay the price of complete surrender, and thus purchasing the Lord, I will enjoy with him just like Lakshmi Devi. That was 35. Here is 39. With devotion, I accept the great benefit that the Lord has bestowed upon me. Having given up my sinful desires for ordinary sense gratification, I now take shelter of him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Is a big turnaround, for a prostitute. When the living, this is the final, text 42. When the living entity sees that the entire universe has been seized by the serpent of time, he becomes sober and sane, and at the same time detaches himself from all material sense gratification. In that condition, the living entity is qualified to be his own protector. Well, this is going to go on for nearly a month, and it's Vyasadeva writing, Shukadev speaking, Krishna speaking, and it's over and over and over, and over and over and over and over. So how important is it? It must be really important. Intelligence that's covered is not an asset. But material intelligence is considered to be an asset, because what does material intelligence do? It figures out how to get sense object lined up with the senses. That's what material intelligence does, in newer and better ways and so forth. It's not our friend. But we esteem and value material intelligence like anything. But it's Maya yaparita jnana. Knowledge, Maya has stolen away one's real intelligence. And what's that real? So the real intelligence is over and over. It's a really good section to read. And it's not. This isn't the conclusion. This is the entryway, the doorway into the response to the question that Uddhava was asking. How can I always think of you and understand you, even in your physical absence after you've gone? It's very relevant. So if we don't get it, our spiritual progress will be very slow. To the degree that we get it, our spiritual progress can be accelerated. It's not the essence. Knowledge and detachment is not the essence. Bhakti is the essence. But to get to bhakti, there's an obstacle, an impediment, our attraction to the temporary, trying to be enjoyers. Over and over and over and over and over. Okay. And then we're still attached. We want to nourish bhakti, and bhakti itself produces jnana and vairagya. That's from Canto 1, Chapter 2. Bhakti gives rise to, spontaneously, naturally, gives rise to its byproduct, knowledge and detachment. So what we're doing is not just cultivating knowledge, we're cultivating bhakti by reading, because Krishna's giving to Uddhava bhakti. But there's detachment. So, carrying on with text number 2. Following the example of the python, one should give up material endeavors and accept for one's maintenance food that comes of its own accord, whether such food be delicious or tasteless, ample or meager. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. The python is satisfied with whatever comes of its own accord. Instead of endeavoring for sense enjoyment, the python remains satisfied with any condition of life. It does not try to eat palatable food or too much food, and it does not try to manipulate the senses, mind, and speech for attaining happiness. Instead, the python always displays its gravity. Paragraph. The lesson to be learned from the python is that those who are inclined towards the service of Lord Krishna should not be anxious to gratify their senses. They should not be bound up by the urges of the belly and genitals. One should remain indifferent to such propensities. Eating too much, collecting too much, and endeavoring too much are not favorable for service of the Supreme Lord. Rather than seeing the python as a mere snake, one should consider to be a spiritual master. Indeed, one can see how the Supreme Lord is present everywhere. How the Supreme Lord is present everywhere. One who can see how the Supreme Lord is present everywhere must be considered a Mahabhagavata. Only those who are fully surrendered to the Supreme Lord are actually sober and qualified to serve the Supreme Lord. They are like the python who is never agitated for sense enjoyment. And Vishwanath's commentary is one sentence, really short. One should take food as the python does, comma, without much action. Text number 3. If at any time food does not come, then a saintly person should fast for many days without making endeavor. He should understand that by God's arrangement, he must fast. Thus, following the example of the python, he should remain peaceful and patient. And the BBT purport reads, if by God's arrangement one is forced to suffer material hardship, then one should think, quote, due to my past sinful activity, I am now being punished. In this way, God is merely making me humble, unquote. The word shayita means one should remain peaceful and patient without mental agitation. Dishtabuk means one must accept the personality of Godhead as the supreme controller and not foolishly give up one's faith due to material inconvenience. Quoting Brahma's prayers, Tattenu Kampam, Susamikshimano, etc. A devotee of the Lord always accepts material hardship as the mercy of Lord Krishna. Thus, he becomes eligible for supreme liberation. Python gets some bhakti points here. I mean, the python is not, but a sadhu is dependent upon Krishna and seeing favorable, unfavorable in relation to Krishna. To be like the python, but connect to Krishna. Just 2 more, and we're finished for this morning. Here's text 4. A saintly person should remain peaceful and materially inactive, maintaining his body without much endeavor. Even though possessed of full sensual, mental, and physical strength, a saintly person should not become active for material gain, but rather should always remain alert to his self-interest. Now, this is kind of summarizing what the Avadhuta Brahmana was like. That's what Yadu said, hey, look at you. You're apparently capable of sensual prowess, but you're not endeavoring, and you're very peaceful, and you're not like everybody else. So it's a sign or a symptom of knowledge and detachment, and ultimately a symptom of bhakti, that those who are successful in bhakti have knowledge and detachment. And this is part of that. Bhaktisiddhanta uses the phrase, always remaining fixed in his real self-interest. So the BBT purport reads, the word vita nidraha in this verse is very significant. Nidra means sleep or ignorance, and vita means free from. In other words, a transcendentalist should always be awake to his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and should carefully cultivate Krishna consciousness. Being confident in his relationship with the Lord, he should not endeavor for his personal maintenance, knowing that the Lord is protecting him in all respects. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states that the example of the python is given so that one will not uselessly waste his time in bodily maintenance. Paragraph. One should not think, however, that the purpose of life is to lie on the ground like a python or make a show of starving the body. The example of the python should not encourage one to become completely inactive. One should rather become active in spiritual advancement and inactive in material sense gratification. If one becomes completely inactive, that is certainly nidra, or the darkness of ignorance, in which one remains asleep to his identity as an eternal servant of the personality of Godhead. Paragraph. A transcendentalist is eager to execute his service to the Lord, and therefore he is grateful when the Lord provides material facilities for such service. Mere renunciation of the material world is palgu vairagya, or an immature stage of spiritual understanding. One must come to the stage of yukta vairagya, or engaging everything in the service of Lord Krishna. It is our practical experience that a devotee absorbed in spreading Krishna consciousness automatically receives all facilities for his personal maintenance. That was the BBT part. We're almost done, because I'm just going to end with 4, because 5 starts another topic. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport reads, one should give up lethargy and always remain awake to his real self-interest by engaging in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. One should not waste time accumulating more and more material assets in this way. One should follow the example of the python. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, Vita nidra means that he should remain constantly alert, thinking of the Supreme Lord as his goal, since he has taken shelter of living like a python, thinking, quote, my time should not be wasted in endeavoring for maintenance of my body. Such things are not my goal. So you may do something that's for the maintenance of the body, but don't forget the goal. The goal is not maintaining the body. Here's some nice artwork. Compliments of Shruti. Following the example of the python, this is text 2, one should give up material endeavors and accept for one's maintenance food that comes of its own accord, whether such food be delicious or tasteless, ample or meager. Just like the python, he should remain peaceful and patient. Follow in the footsteps of a python. What's next, huh? Text 3. A devotee of the Lord always accepts material hardship as the mercy of Lord Krishna, that he becomes eligible for supreme liberation. And of course, we have to see a picture of Raghunath Das Goswami about eating meagerly. So here he is. Being confident of his relationship with the Lord, he should not endeavor for his personal maintenance, knowing that the Lord is protecting him in all respects. The example of the python should not encourage one to become completely inactive. One should rather become active in spiritual advancement and inactive in material sense gratification. One more from text 4. A transcendentalist is eager to associate his service to execute his service to the Lord. And therefore he is grateful when the Lord provides material facilities for such service. It is our practical experience that a devotee absorbed in spreading Krishna consciousness automatically receives all facilities for his personal maintenance. Certainly that was exemplified by Prabhupada and in turn by his encouragement, his followers. Quarter after 8. Let's see if there's some discussion. It's a nice topic, huh? Practical. Anything?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Jnana and Vairagya. By hearing about Pingala, she got instantly Vairagyam. So just wondering, is that because Krishna gives that remembrance because of their pious activities?
Well, Krishna can give remembrance even if one is not pious.
Mm.
That's not the case. Generally, impiety creates clouds and covers and, Maya. The influence of Maya is the byproduct of impiety. And so that's generally the case. So generally, we don't know what she did in the past. We don't know about her piety. But somehow the light went on. Like the prostitute that Haridas Thakur rescued, the number one prostitute in the town. We do know what she was doing otherwise. So, now in her case, her association with Haridas and hearing him chant the holy name, that made the difference. So we don't know about her piety. We just know Super Soul inspired her somehow, for some reason. Mm-hmm.
Arjuna got knowledge from Krishna, but when Krishna departed, did Arjuna lament or did he understand the knowledge?
Did Arjuna lament after Krishna departed? That's your question? Oh, yeah. He carried on. He had a service to do. He wasn't told directly, but he was told through Krishna's chariot driver, go back to Dwarka and tell the residents of Dwarka the whole city is going to be underwater in 7 days. And Arjuna is there. Arjuna should take my queens to Hastinapur for safety, for protection. Because they're queens, they need protection. So he had some service, so he was able to carry on because he had some service. And same thing happened with Uddhava. Uddhava had some service. The service for Uddhava was take the teachings I've given you, go to Badrik Ashram, way in the Himalayas, and share this knowledge with the devotees of Narayan Rishi. Some service sustained his life. Then some other, travel around as a sadhu and give this knowledge to others as well. So Arjun struggled because of separation, of course. You read about that, Canto 1, after Krishna departs, Arjun comes back to Hastinapur and speaks to Maharaj Yudhisthira. Arjuna, you look a wreck. What happened? Yudhisthira knows intuitively Arjun blurts it out. Happened. But by speaking about Krishna, he then remembered Krishna, and particularly what he heard on the Kurukshetra battle. Krishna gave these instructions so that I could live connected with him even in his physical absence. So he was feeling those feelings for sure. Transcendental feelings. But he was revived by remembrance.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. When we are talking about the material intelligence, I had the question that only if the material intelligence comes down will we get the spiritual intelligence. Is there any relationship?
I don't understand your question. Say it again differently. Is there a correlation between material and spiritual intelligence? That's what you're asking?
Yes. If the material intelligence...
Well, material intelligence means forgetfulness. And spiritual intelligence you may also discern. But the discernment is to reach Krishna. Material intelligence does not connect with Krishna. Spiritual intelligence connects with Krishna. There may be the discerning, like let's just say material intelligence. Go cook breakfast. Take material intelligence to go cook breakfast. And then a devotee goes and cooks breakfast. So there's some similarity. It looks the same, but it's the operation is quite different because contemplation is different, and the happiness is different. Is that all right?
Guru Maharaj, as you're saying, the devotee of the Lord accepts as the mercy of the Lord.
Can you know that one? Go ahead.
By your mercy. So I was thinking this attachment to Krishna in that scenario could maybe in two ways, right? Like because he doesn't want, one doesn't want that kind of a hardship, so he is getting attached.
One doesn't want that kind of
hardships.
Hardship.
That's the reason he is getting attached. But another may be like realizing that no matter what, being in this material world, these things are going to come anyway. So it's better to take shelter of Krishna. So, but is it in either case? It is just it's okay to getting attached, or
the thing by its result. And the desired result is attachment to Krishna. So detachment without attachment to Krishna. So you judge a thing by its result. So one can go in this path or that path or the other path. Attachment to Krishna is the standard. Is it, is this good or preferred or, recommended? Does that answer your question? Shankadari, something?
These examples of the different animals having attraction for particular sense and learning from them, but for the humans, there is a induce or opportunity for all the senses to be out of control, whereas the animals have, programmed to be in a particular way. But my question is, even though I don't feel that I have, attachment for a particular sense or anything, but still from Bhagavad Gita I learned that the primary reason for uncontrolled mind is attraction, uncontrolled senses. What other reasons could be there for uncontrolled mind? Because I'm still having trouble focusing on chanting.
Well, there's gross sense objects, there, tanmatra, and there's happiness, subtle happiness. So your position may not be specifically focused on a sense object or a certain type of sense object or something like that. It can be subtle. Generally there's a mix, but if supposing someone's a philosopher and they're not, they're detached from supposing they're detached from gross worldly pursuits, but they're pursuing something subtle. Generally, there's a mix. It may not be, like ugly and astonishingly yucky or something like that, but there is in fact an attraction that's binding. It's the influence of Maya. How can you get over it? Knowledge and detachment, and then bhakti, or this bhakti that produces knowledge and detachment. The bhakti process. Bhakti, it's a short answer. Follow the bhakti process nicely, and you can get on the other side. Correct? Daiviyesha gunamayi Mameviye prapadyante. That's all. We're ready for online questions. We have some online questions.
This is by Apurva Prabhu. He says, how to take material hardships as the mercy of Lord Krishna. Practically, what should we do for it?
Well, it's an instruction. And that's practical. I mean, you can neglect instruction. Your children, you can give an instruction. Don't just eat the sweets. You got to eat some spinach too. They push the spinach over there and they only eat the sweets or whatever. So, how to get your kid to eat spinach along with the sweets. You don't want to deprive them of sweets, but you want them to have balanced diet. So you can't stand there with a club. It's not going to work. So it's not, here with an eagerness to get on the other side of your material struggles, or here with an eagerness to connect with transcendence, or here with an eagerness to restore your forgotten relationship with Krishna, depending upon the stage of your bhakti. But it's the main method is by hearing, and cleansing and knowledge awakens by hearing, and then practically applying what we hear. That's how.
This is from Sneha Vali Mataji. She has 2 points. First is that we read that by inference one cannot know the Supreme Lord. We also know that Krishna gives intelligence within the heart to know him, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. If he is giving us intelligence Buddhi Yoga, then why we say we cannot know him through intelligence?
We can know of his existence. Let's put it this way. Over here, we're about to have breakfast. So we can know that by having breakfast, our hunger will be satisfied. So just know that when you have breakfast, your hunger will be satisfied. But it's not the same as having breakfast. And then you have a direct experience, not just inference, but direct experience. So bhakti is that direct experience. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam, in the mood of serving Krishna, then we can realize Krishna. It's like eating. And then you can realize my hunger is gone.
This is from Shraddha Prabhu. I could not understand the analogy in verse 1. After all, a pretty hat is no cure for a homely face.
After all what?
After all, a pretty hat is no cure for a homely face. Could you help me understand?
Oh, that's
this?
just Hridayananda Maharaj's cleverness. I can explain, but if you really want to get down into it, you go ask Hridayananda Maharaj, because it's clearly got his fingerprints all over it. A decoration doesn't make beauty. The material world is the material world, and you can perfume it and pretty it, but it's not. It is what it is. It's not a place of happiness. That's the meaning. It's a decoration doesn't make something beautiful.
This is from Shriya Mataji. From the teachings of the Python today about to accept what comes our way, sometimes there are hesitations to accept instructions as it is due to mental speculation
Yes.
and thinking that I'm not qualified. How can I overcome these speculations and raise above that platform?
By faith, by regular hearing, and by regular hearing, and those things that you can understand, you apply them, and that will nourish your faith, because you'll get some realization. Wow, look at this. Then you go back again to the same source and hear even the same instruction or other instructions, and it nourishes faith. Application of knowledge nourishes faith. That's it. One more.
Amara Mataji. Many times as a grihastha, we are just caught up in daily routine, maintaining children, supporting them emotionally, fulfilling their needs and wants, and for that we need to endeavor. So while trying to perform our duties and also trying to do a good sadhana, I feel that full surrender like Pingala is something else and on a completely different level. At our stage, what will that surrender look like?
It's similar answers. It's faithfully doing. You accept the acceptance and progress theme. This is my. This is where I am. And you just outlined where you are. And so that you just accept. And by acting according to my psychophysical nature, I'm doing my duties. I'm trying to dedicate those duties, not just in the mood of detachment, but the mood of pleasing Krishna. Then gradually I'll become cleansed, and gradually my attraction for Krishna will grow. And because I have that faith, I continue. That's what it will look like. One more just popped up.
Snehavali Mataji, how can we understand Pingala's change of heart on its own without receiving any mercy or association?
Without receiving what?
Without receiving any mercy or association.
Well, we don't know what happened prior to that. There isn't a description of what happened. It's just like this question of her pious activities. Did she have pious activities? Who knows? What instructions did she receive before the light went on? We don't know. But there, one can be sure there's something preceding. But let us remind ourselves that this section, we read it at the very beginning, this section explicitly, the Avadhuta Brahman, doesn't say, I heard from the cyclic succession such and such. Rather, it's knowledge and detachment. So Pingala may have, been awarded intelligence that's due to knowledge and detachment without necessarily everything, the full 9 yards is, from the cyclic succession. We can assume. We don't know. But we can assume some elevated association somewhere along the way so that there's some eligibility for realizing what she realized. Of course, Krishna can do anything, but almost for certain, some elevated association somewhere along the way. Another one.
Yeah. 2 questions from Prem Tarangini Mataji.
Go ahead.
Okay. In trying to see Krishna everywhere, there seems to be an element of mental speculation when the seeing is not exactly based on bhakti or on an inspiration that Krishna gives. May I request you to please comment?
Yeah, it's not exactly mental speculation. It can be inspiration. Now, devotional service is dependent upon devotee association. Someone carrying bhakti can awaken bhakti in another. So if there's no bhakti, then you can say, rightly so. It's not neither is it sustainable, nor is it even really tangible. It's just notional, and it'll surface and disappear. So it's not really substantial. The real substantial is where there's devotee association, bhakti awakens. But what we just that section that we read from Burjan's book, The Backward Glance, summarizing from those verses and purports that we read, the principle of directly and indirectly, that is, experiencing and hearing from others who have experienced, one can infer the presence of the Supreme Lord. Knowledge can help you infer the presence of the Supreme Lord and the soul, and there is a relationship. That it's not going to be, it's like this example of knowing that when I eat breakfast, I'll be satisfied, and going and having breakfast. So bhakti is where you have that direct experience. So it's not exactly mental. It's to a degree, to a degree, it's intellectual, it's notional. So the intellect and the mind are connected and, going in the direction of there must be Supreme Lord. But it's not, the direct experience of the personality of Godhead is not there. It's not exactly mental speculation. It's some intelligence given by Supersoul to indicate I need, the conclusion is I need a spiritual master to help me have that direct experience, because that's Krishna's program.
And what is the process for awakening and strengthening bhakti in such situations? We know bhakti does not depend on karma, but on a practical level, we do see some connection.
Well, there's stages, and I'll use the word alignment. That is what we do and say. That's the body, and then there's the mind. That's the values, and trying to align our values with our actions and speech, and and then what that higher spiritual reality, and align all of those together, so that that's something that we can work on, the internal and external cultivation of bhakti. And what drives it is the internal cultivation of bhakti. Otherwise, stop and start and pick it up and drop it and unsteady. So that core value is something that is in the heart, and it becomes awakened through sadhu sangha. So stay always in good association, and that's one of the most important principles of reaching a more mature stage of bhakti. I mean, there's effort on our side, but we need mercy. Okay, Hare Krishna. Prabhupada, Jai.